Hi there. Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in this week's exciting episode, we're going to be talking about a little film called Day Shift.
Day Shift came out on Netflix. Seen a lot of activity on it and just people on Letterboxd checking it out in their recent activity feed. Directed by J.J. Perry, his feature film debut. Starring Jamie Foxx, Dave Franco, Natasha Liu Bordizzo, Megan Good, Zion Broadnax, and Snoop Dogg, amongst a host of other talented actors, including a little appearance by fan favorite Peter Stormare.
Yes.
Right?
I always love when he shows up.
So, with all that, vampires, they are alluring. It is interesting to see new vampire movies come. There's so many different genres they touch upon. So we see the latest movie now is Day Shift on Netflix. And this is an interesting genre mashup of action, buddy cop stuff, comedy. It's horror. There's a lot of gore going on in here, but this movie really touched on a lot of different genres that in the end for me made it pretty satisfying. What were your first impressions of Day Shift?
I immediately thought of John Carpenter's Vampires, because just that sense of almost like the blue collar kind of vampire hunter going around doing their job. It started off okay. Jamie Foxx is obviously the dude's hugely charismatic. He's incredibly talented. So a large part of why this works is because Jamie Foxx.
Yeah, if it wasn't for
great.
Jamie Foxx being here, the movie probably wouldn't be nearly as good. It may not have even gotten made if Foxx wasn't attached to it.
Exactly. I think it really fell apart for me in the second half, just in terms of it felt like it was plagued by this kind of standard Netflix movie flaws, which was that it had a really cool, really great opening and a really great setup, but it had no idea how it wanted to end itself, right? It had no idea how where it was going and what the end was going to be, it felt like. And it felt like there was a lot of setup for future sequels that may or may not exist.
See, I got a little of the opposite sense. I felt like their world building wasn't nearly as heavy-handed as some Netflix's other elements. Brightburn comes to mind, where it is that similar thing where not only they're vampires, there's all the different creatures, and they play so heavily into that stuff. It's Brightburn depended on that a lot more than Day Shift. For me, Day Shift was a little more it was definitely a lighter film with its comedic turn, but their motivations were so simple and relatable, I thought.
Yeah, but it's for me, the second half just lost so much focus and was we got to.
So when does
we got to do stuff?
When does the second half start for you?
I don't know. It kind of.
And spoilers, just because we didn't throw it out there, but definitely spoilers for everything here.
They meet up with those other vampire hunters and they're fighting and stuff. And then around the time, it's never I don't know. The main vampire lady there, played by Carla Souza, for me, her motivations were never clearly defined. It's she's trying to.
Really? Her motivations were very clear.
This guy killed her daughter.
Yeah.
But then there's this whole other backstory that they were kind of teasing.
That's what I love about it.
That wasn't fleshed out.
She's the classic 80s, 90s villain where she's a real estate baron. She basically, it's very simple. She's trying to buy real estate to build a vampire community.
Yeah. But there was other factions of vampires that they kind of hinted at. Didn't really show. It was really
they don't really need to
weird.
do that. I don't think it's weird at all. I think that was the light world building they did, just giving you enough to be that's out there, but it's not the focus, because the focus is her revenge against Bud, Jamie Foxx's character, for Bud killing her daughter.
So for me, when it started to fall apart was they had, is his name Bud? No.
Yeah, it is. His name is Bud Jablonski.
Classic action hero name. No, when they had, she found out who had killed her daughter. She went to their house, had him and his friend and his wife and his daughter dead to rights. She could have easily killed them, tortured and killed them right there. but she chose not to. It was really just like classic stupid bad guy monologue kind of logic, and it's just like, we can do better than this in the year of our Lord 2022. Like, you want to take revenge on them now. Don't set up some complicated stupid process like Dr. Evil level complicated scheme that gives the hero lots of time to regroup and escape. Like, it's just,
well, she did kill the buddy. She did kill and turn into a vampire, Dave Franco's character, Seth. I mean, so that was some immediate repercussions. And she does kill his buddy in the black market Fang store as well.
Yeah, Peter Stormare kind of goes out. That's too bad. Yeah, sort of, but like, she wanted revenge against him. So it's like, oh, I have your wife and kid right here. I could kill them right in front of you. But instead, I'm going to have this complicated plot. I could give you time to go and regroup with your friends and come in and get me. And then the whole thing is just like, okay, it kind of devolved into like generic CGI fest action, which the fight, there was an earlier fight, like I said, with the so they're two vampire hunters. I think one of them was played by Scott Adkins. Yeah, he was one of the vampire hunters. He's like a well-known He's a well-known stunt
guy.
He's actually been a stuntman / actor, I guess. He's actually in movies acting with real human emotion.
It might be important to note out that I read J.J. Perry is also a long story like stunt person and stunt coordinator. And I think that's why the action really works for me in this movie. There's a lot of interesting visual things happening with the stunts. And I think it's enhanced with a little bit of CGI, especially the actual gore, but really absolutely pulled forward through
that scene,
the contortionist vampires, and who were like actually doing weird things. I should say weird things. They're doing contortionist person things, which I don't see very often. So it looks surreal. And I thought that really set the movie apart in terms of like an action film, like a fantasy action film.
Like there's a couple of fights early on with like Jamie Foxx, and I think it was like a bowling alley fighting off those vampire teens. Like that was really cool.
I mean, even the first fight when he's going after the old lady, it's just like that fight was wild.
Yeah, and it was that was really good. And then that fight with Scott Adkins and his buddy there, that was in the house, that was really good. Which is maybe why like the fights in the last half felt kind of lackluster, because all of a sudden it felt like the choreography was just like very, very straightforward and nothing really interesting was happening.
I think what happens at the end of the movie is basically they're in these catacombs, and it does fall prey to that things like, instead of like vampires coming, we're just going to throw like wild, rabid monsters down these halls that are vampire hunters, and they'll have no problem killing any of them. Where previously it's like you do see them struggle to kill a few of them here and there.
Yeah.
And one of the big, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I'm not knocking the movie too much for it. Although it's probably reflected in the final score. That's not like super high, but that does take away from the movie a little bit, because at times it feels like, are these sort of like semi-intelligent zombies or are these actual vampires? And is them saying there's different like classes of vampires like a way to sort of get out of having to explain why some are so weak or like brainless as opposed to other ones which are extraordinarily powerful?
It was really weird because they were talking about like Dave Franco's character there, who was like the bookworm kind of character, who I got to give props to Dave Franco here. He played that kind of bookwormy office character really well. He goes out in the field and like you can tell like he's super afraid, and like when he wets his pants there a couple times. It's
I like that bit through the movie.
It's like, okay, it's showing like and it's kind of like it's meant to show is like, oh yeah, for a real regular person, all this stuff is really, really scary, right? Because like otherwise, like, oh, these vampires, like, oh yeah, they're just, who cares? But yeah, he's talking one time about like different breeds of vampires, almost like he's talking about like different breeds of insects or animals or something, right?
Yeah.
And like, sometimes the vampires seem animalistic, and sometimes they seem more intelligent and cunning. I think they kind of hand wave some of that away, where like at the beginning, like one scene where they go and hunt like the newly made vampires in the bowling alley there. It's like, when they first turn, they're kind of feral before they get their footing and become and regain their kind of senses after they've eaten for a bit. So it's like, sure, whatever, but like it did seem a little bit inconsistent, where like some of them were like zombie animal kind of characters who were just running on instinct, and some of the vampires were intelligent, like humans with fangs who were like wielding guns and stuff as well. But yeah, like the last
Yeah.
half is like just standing there shooting, as opposed to like the first action scenes where they're actually like really interesting. Like you said, like with some of the contortionists and some of the different setups, was like it felt like they were doing some like let's try some cool stuff here. And the last half was just like, no, just stand there with your guns and shoot down the hallway. I was like, oh, okay, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a valid criticism. I don't think I really let it bother me that much because there was a lot of other fun things happening throughout the movie. And you mentioned earlier, it's like that sort of what was it, blue collar
Yeah.
worker thing that was in Vampires, like John Carpenter's Vampires, is also in here where they go a step further, and the vampire hunter is kind of a profession because these vampire fangs have value in the market, but there's a black market for them, which is kind of like underground. And it's like, I don't know if it's black market because vampires aren't known to the general populace. Like every day, like his ex-wife, Bud's ex-wife, doesn't know there's vampires, doesn't know he's a vampire hunter, but that's how he's making his living, posing as a pool cleaning dude. And there's a union of vampire hunters, which is just, I really like that touch. And it's just like, oh, he's been kicked out of the union, has to try and get back in because they pay a lot more for those vampire fangs. And I mean, Dave Franco's character is kind of like an expert. He can look at these fangs, immediately see these details, just like Peter Stormare's character will look at a fang and sort of see, like, you can see the age of them, see some details about them. I really liked that part, and really it cemented it more the real world. And part of Bud's motivation to go join the union and fight more vampires is he just needs to pay for his daughter's braces.
And her school, yeah.
They mentioned and her school tuition, but it's like, I think everyone can relate, especially to the dental work. It's just like, oh, we need benefits. Workers need benefits. And you have to go join this union to get the full benefits and get all your money. And then he's nickel and dimed a little bit. He's just like membership fees right off the bat. So those $5,000 fangs are now worth about $1,000 in his pocket. So he has to go on a vampire killing, like over the course of like 7 days or something, which happens very quickly throughout the film. But he's basically just trying to raise money for taking care of his daughter because there's a threat that his daughter and his ex-wife are going to move across the country. It was interesting. Did you like the union stuff? Did you like that element? I mean,
yeah,
Dave Franco's character was kind of interesting as that like fresh face. You know, he's the office guy, but he's part of this vampire hunter world, and this is his first exposure to it. Just kind of like us, the audience, like we're gonna get a tour of what this guy does, like what a vampire hunter does, and all their rules.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting idea. It's in the execution, I guess. It was just kind of on the periphery. If you're gonna introduce that, I wish they would have fleshed it out a little bit more. It was there more as like, I don't know. It was a cool idea. So it's a kind of comedy, maybe dramedy is the right word for this movie. But then like the boss,
it's an action comedy.
But then like the boss was just like cartoonishly, just like really, really weird. Everyone else was like, it seemed like he was in a different movie than everybody else. And that kind of threw me off. It was like everyone else was like kind of quirky. But they were like Snoop Dogg was playing like his, smooth criminal kind of character, like super calm and cool and collected. And Jamie Foxx was like the dad trying to make ends meet. And there was just like this weird, their boss was like super, like, I don't know. It was like really bizarre. And it kind of took me out of it. Was it the same? Like, I don't know. Like, what do you think of that character? Like the union boss there? It was just really weird, man.
Yeah, I don't even remember the boss that much. He was basically just this catalyst to hook the two of them together, right? It's just like you have to go, like Seth has to go out and be with Bud to like supervise him. He was being a bit of a hard ass, I guess. But it's just, it didn't really factor into my thoughts on the movie afterwards. Like I'm not even sure who plays him or what his character was through the movie. Was it memorable?
I wish they would have played that up more throughout the movie and come back to that a bit more. Because like that whole, I always love the idea of like the underworld and like, oh, here's a secondary world happening kind of underneath the sheen of our regular everyday lives, our regular everyday civilization.
That's why I liked the multiple levels of underworld happen here, where you have, first off, vampires exist. People don't know about vampires. It's not like, I'm going to reference Brightburn again, where otherworldly creatures are part of everyday society, right? So here, vampires are not known. There seem to be a lot of them. And there's a whole vampire hunter society that's fully unionized and funded really well because they're giving out a ton of cash for like fangs. Right? It's like they're talking like $5,000 to $10,000. It's like, where are they getting this money
I really
from?
wish you hadn't mentioned that, because now you're making me like the movie even less, because like you're pointing out plot holes here. It's like, yeah, where do they internally? It's like, yeah, they have their economy, but like, where are they getting funding externally to pump money into this? It's like, oh my God, why would you say that, Brian? I'm trying to.
Well, because this was a lighthearted comedy film where that stuff doesn't really matter. Like they hint at it,
Well,
and
it kind of matters.
I mean, you can point out. I mean, you could go take the cinema sins approach and like try and pick apart everything.
No. I'm not nitpicking this, Brian. But like I've said before, every movie has to have an internal logic of the way things work. If you're gonna ask those questions, then you have to have in-universe answers for those questions.
I'm happy we didn't end up with a 4.5 hour long day shift movie that had to explain the economics of their world or anything.
Come on, I think you're being a little bit facetious here, Brian. You've seen world building, like in From Dusk Till Dawn, we were talking about earlier. They do an incredible amount of world building in a very short amount of time. It's possible
and they don't answer every single question out
there.
I don't think a movie has to.
I'm not asking them to answer every single question. I'm just asking them to be consistent with their internal logic.
Fair enough. So what part of the movie did you like? Did you like any part of this movie, I guess?
Well, I talked about Jamie Foxx, Dave Franco.
Okay, Jamie Foxx.
Peter Stormare. Like some of the early action scenes were pretty good.
Like the villain. Let's talk about the main villain here, because I do agree. I don't feel like she was entirely fleshed out to be like a main villain that was very imposing on them. They didn't really interact with her until the very, very end, right? She was just sort of looming in the background. We see her abilities. She's an extraordinarily strong vampire, super fast, all this stuff, but it's like her motivations were, I mean, revenge, but also the real estate stuff. But it's like the final fight, was that good? Like, was she a good villain throughout this whole thing? I don't know.
I mean, the actor unfortunately wasn't given a whole lot to work with.
It was really more about like having Jamie Foxx be on screen and be pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, the main villain didn't seem menacing at all. Maybe it was a matter of not having, like miscasting, because like the actor just didn't. I didn't get the sense of, like, she wasn't scary to me. She, like, there was at no point in the movie was I worried for the protagonist because of that villain. I was like, she's not scary like she's not threatening at all. Like, I don't know, man. Like, even that last fight is like, she can move, like, essentially, functionally, she can move as fast as the Flash can. That fight should have been over in literally 2 seconds. Again, is like, just follow your own internal. If she can move that fast, or maybe she can't move that fast all the time. Maybe she gets tired, but just give her throwaway lines like, I need more blood to move fast again. I was like, I don't know, man, but like, why not just, like, if you can move that fast, why not just punch through Jamie Foxx's chest and rip out his heart in the first 2 seconds of that battle? I don't know.
Basically, it's that classic villain thing where they want to see the hero suffer and they need to set up the environment. It was just like, all right, we're going to, like she says explicitly, I'm going to, what was it? She was going to turn his daughter into a vampire, have the daughter drink the blood of the mother, and have Bud watch the whole thing and then kill him afterwards, right? And why she couldn't do that in the house when she had them all dead to rights, I don't know. Maybe it's just a weird vampire like ritual thing. She's got to go into her underground layers to like make it like that much cooler. But I don't know. It is a classic.
Maybe it's because like
trope, really.
The characters, like the daughter and the wife, didn't seem too worried about it. Like, she kept telling this, and then there's like, like, you don't know me that much. Is like, you don't know me that well. I'm gonna get angry and I'm gonna get back at you. It's like, the daughter didn't seem scared. The wife didn't seem too concerned about it. Maybe it was just like, maybe it was partly the director was just like, he's a first time director, so I give him some slack that way. It's like, didn't really sell the emotional weight of like what was going on in the story. You're talking about these like really horrible things, like essentially like real world analogy would be like, inducting this child, indoctrinating them into a cult and forcing them to kill a parent. It's like, that's that's an incredibly horrifying thought.
It's a horrifying idea, and in a comedy film, you're not going to go in those directions.
Yeah,
right?
but even
just all you can do is thread. It's like the daughter has the plot armor.
In an action comedy, they could have had like, like they could have been like frightened or something, shown some kind of emotion other than like they get angry, like they're defiant. It was like, I don't know. As a regular Joe, if I were captured by vampires, like, I wouldn't be probably talking back to them. I don't know. Like, that's not. fear works differently. I don't know.
How did you feel about Seth, which is the what's his face, Dave Franco character, getting turned, and then Bud has to decapitate him, right? He has to kill him, and he basically is. But Seth is able to reattach his head, and like it heals itself. It's just like, did any of that work for you? Was that kind of like going too far into like the slapstick humor, maybe?
No, that stuff was like,
Or was that kind of like, this was fine?
I was just like, meh. I was like, sure. It just kind of slapsticky. Dave Franco, again, like he did a really good job with that character where I felt like, oh, not every character has to be a badass, right? There's different roles until at the end, it's like essentially him becoming a vampire was a way of them short circuiting that and turning him into an immediate badass. Cause then he starts going from not even being able to use a gun to like tearing people's like arms off and jumping around and doing crazy acrobatics. So that kind of undermined the character for me a little bit, where it's like, oh, we don't need every character to be the gun-toting action hero. There's actually other functions. Like, yeah, his value came from his knowledge, and it's like, no. You're only valuable if you can, shoot a gun and tear people's arms off. It's like, okay, so you took the where these characters were differentiated and interesting, and then you just like homogenized them. So it's like they're all action heroes now. It's like, it was okay, I guess. Like Dave Franco did a good job.
Yeah.
But again, it felt like they didn't really know. Once he was turned into a vampire, it's like they didn't know what to do with him. It's like, sure, go and fight some guys now. It's like, sure, like you've been a vampire for 2 minutes. These guys have been vampires for hundreds of years, but like you can go and kill them. It's fine.
I think he did struggle quite a bit with the like the main bodyguard fight, and I think he needed the help of the lawyer, not the lawyer, the neighbor.
Yeah, should we see
the
like
neighbor
a
friend
familiar or something? Or
I think she was. Was she a vampire or was she a familiar?
Again, it wasn't super clear. I have to go back because
I thought she was a vampire because she had the vampire blood like in her fridge.
But I thought she was a servant of one of the vampires. I don't know. It's not really super clear.
I'm not sure. It didn't really think about it too much because it was more focused on the fact that there could be like a good vampire, and Seth is basically a good, like he wants to go kill all the other vampires. Even though he's a vampire now, it's not like you're immediately just like turned into wanting to kill all humans, right?
But then that begs the question, like, it would have been more interesting then is like, oh, maybe there are different factions in the vampire. Maybe they're not all mindless killers. Maybe there's other people out there. I don't know. Like, it's weird that like it was just like really superficial writing where it's like, oh, he's the good vampire because he's the hero, not because of some kind of greater conflict like that vampires can have. Like you look at Interview with the Vampire where, Brad Pitt's character was like constantly like for a long time is like drinking rat blood because like the morality of killing humans, right?
Yeah.
It's like, which I don't expect them. Yes, I know what you're gonna say. I don't expect them to deal with the same level of morality in this action comedy.
Well, I'm saying maybe in the inevitable universe of movies that will come after this, if this is successful, we'll get like serious ones where they explore that morality, and then we'll get more action
I don't need
comedy
them to
ones.
go in that depth or to be serious. I'm not saying that every vampire movie doesn't have to be Interview with the Vampire, but it felt like the cheapest version of like 80s style writing in terms of writing the heroes of the story. And just in terms of giving them, like you said, I think the whole family just seemed to have like insane plot armor. And then the characters were just like, they survived because they were the heroes, not because of anything that they necessarily did. I don't know, Snoop Dogg at the end there, spoilers, when I don't know, it's not clear whether he blew himself up or whether it was just like, did he have like a light bomb, like, like a UV bomb or something, like something out of Underworld?
I think it was a UV bomb. So he got bitten. It's kind of unclear how quickly they turn in this movie.
Oh, he got bitten, which is like, so is he a vampire now? I don't know.
Well, if that was the thing, it's just like you presume maybe the UV bomb is going to kill him. And I think even himself, that character is probably in that moment thinking, well, this could be it. So we're doing this. And then we find out sort of not even post credits or mid credits, like he emerges out of a sewer grate. He's like, I'm still alive, but presumably he's a full out vampire now as well. And might be he might be a Blade type character.
Oh, maybe
down the road.
Yeah. But what's weird is like at the end too, is like, it's a happy ending. It was like, but you ruined Seth's life now. Like it's irrevocably changed. He can't even tell his boss he's a vampire or else they're going to kill him. And it's like happy ending, I guess. It's like everybody's kind of walks away. It's like they they just kind of hand wave. There's like, not that they hand wave, they just like didn't care about wrapping up any of those stories, which is, listen, I don't need a whole 30-minute epilogue, which is fine, but it's like, maybe address some of these questions, or just maybe not even address them, but just like give some in-universe clues that I can use to, extrapolate from this. Cause like, it seems like Jamie Foxx gets his whole family back and Dave Franco his whole life is screwed. And that's a happy ending for both of them somehow. I don't know.
Well, Dave Franco seems somewhat happy that he was a vampire and he could do some new things with his life. But
Guess.
I think for Dave Franco is like, he turned into a vampire and it's like he felt more comfortable with that than he did like what was expected with him before, if that makes any sense. Like they kind of wanted him to be out of the field and he was not comfortable. He was happy riding the desk. Maybe. And now he is happy to be out of the field because he has superpowers,
I guess. Oh,
I don't
also,
know.
Okay, something I did like about the movie when they tried to expand on the vampire mythology. So one thing was like, oh, it's different species of vampires. Like, that's cool. But then there was the other thing where I think when you killed them or when you were near a vampire, you got like their pheromones or something on you, or you got some kind of, there was some other substance where you had to like go home and clean yourself. Like I think Jamie Foxx had put together this mix with like garlic and something else. It's like, okay, that's an interesting idea where they're trying to like add to the vampire mythos and add their own kind of ideas in there. Like it was neat where there was like, okay, they were actually putting some thought into some of this. It was like it seemed like they put so much thought into very narrow focus of this movie, and then the rest of it they just kind of left at the last minute. So it was like, it was such a mixed bag for me where, yeah, some of this was so good and some of it just felt like the filmmakers didn't care. So like, why should I care about this? Like, I don't know.
This is one of the few vampire movies, I think I read this somewhere, few vampire movies where the vampires don't show up in the mirror, which is common, but the clothing still shows up in the mirror, right? It's like one of the few films that actually spends the time to like make that happen on screen for a special effect. It's just like, oh, I didn't even think about that in other vampire movies. Of course, Dracula's cloak would show up in a mirror. Yeah, it's just like,
What We Do in the Shadows, where they were like holding items that would float, but their clothes were gone, which was an interesting. It's really interesting how each storyteller takes that and like imagines how those rules would work in the real world. Yeah. But yeah, like you're saying, like little touches like that actually, that was pretty neat.
There was another one. It was a little review I saw, and they were mentioning that, especially with the contortionist actors, you really got a sense that they were moving in such like normally abnormal ways that it's just like, yes, their bones are breaking, they are being wounded, but they're healing that quickly. And it really gave a sense of, oh, they are truly immortal. Like they have that, like a supercharged Wolverine healing factor to them, right? It's just like even during a fight, they're still going to heal. It's not like they're going to have to, I mean, some vampire movies show them retreating into a coffin and they have to like recharge and re-heal themselves in that time. It's like the instantaneous healing like that just kind of helps lend a little more seriousness to how powerful some of them are, because a lot of them are very, very weak.
Some of them seem to heal, and then some of them just seem to like you just tap them on the head with like gently and they fell over. Like it was
yeah, and it's just like, oh, they didn't mention it, but you're like thinking, well, the old lady he kills, maybe she's hundreds of years old, and
she is.
The newborn ones and in the bowling alley are new, and it's like that's the only hint that we got. But they go into a house where there's 30 vampires and they have really no problem taking care of them. It's like they have perfect aim. Even earlier in the film, I think he like shivs a guy to stake him. And the vampire is like, you missed. And it's just like, of course, it's just like, it's not always going to be perfect to stake. Yeah, right in the heart. And he heals from that right away. And it's just like, these other ones, all of a sudden they have perfect aim later on. They're staking them, shooting them, whatever.
Yeah, I guess that's the kind of thing too, is like characters are exactly as strong as the plot needs them to be.
Yeah.
But again, like I would have liked to see a bit more, like that whole house fight. It would have been a bit more satisfying if they had more trouble with the vampires, just to build them up a little bit more. It's like, oh,
well, it's like
House of 30 vampires.
Like Seth's character.
Yeah, like all the characters, like even those the two badasses there that they encountered, is like they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna go in here and take it. It's like, oh, and they're getting overwhelmed. It's like, oh, maybe like it's like, oh, for a second it's like, oh, we're in over our heads a little bit here. It's like, oh, like build a little bit more kind of narrative tension there. don't have to turn into like a full-fledged horror, but I think there was little touches that maybe a more experienced director might have put in there just to add a little bit more nuance and a little bit more engagement for the audience.
You have anything else to add before we head into our ratings of this film?
I don't think so. Was there anything else I missed that, like anything else you would like about the movie that I had not talked about? I feel like I've been talking a lot more than you have here. I don't want to drown out your voice here, Brian.
Well, you're very passionate about the film, which is something. And that's the thing. At the end of the day, I'm not like, I mean, I feel like I'm on the defense for this movie in this conversation, but that could just be.
This better wind up in your top 10 of all time now, Brian. The way you've been defending
right.
this.
We talk about this usually after the podcast is recorded. It's like, oh man, I feel like such a contrarian. And it's just like it. I mean, arguing is part of. I mean, it could be interesting. It's part of human nature, I think. Just like exploring different viewpoints.
It's part of the fun.
But I feel like I'm defending this movie more than I care to, because like this is not like a top 10 movie for me. I'm never going to rewatch this movie ever again. But I did have a lot of fun while I was watching it. It's like,
a fun ride.
Do I laugh out loud a couple times? Like, yeah. Did the contortionist vampires really stand out? Yeah, I really like that stuff. I like the union stuff. There were a couple elements, but yeah, I mean, this is not a 5-banger. That's for sure. So with all that being said, hit me with your rating on this film. I feel like there was a rating for this movie, and you mentioned your after talking about it, it's like it might be declining now. So what was your original rating for this?
So I put it at 2.5 out of 5 stars. So it's not terrible.
Is that still 2.5 out of 5 after talking about it? Because I mean, I do this all the time, usually the opposite direction, where we'll talk about it and be like, oh, it's 4.5. No, let's just hit 5, right? It's just like, let's just bump it up or bump it down.
No, I mean, I think it was like you were saying, like it's a fun ride. It's a nice little distraction. So like 2.5, well, could it drop to 2? Maybe, but like you said, like I have no interest in ever watching this again. I hate to think of it like this, but like there's a whole almost genre of like disposable movies.
Oh yeah.
Where it's just like,
well, it's that immediate apprehension to be like, oh, this is a Netflix movie. I'm immediately apprehensive that this is going to be kind of trash, right? It is.
Yeah.
It is the perfect example or perfect embodiment of like this modern consumerism that we're in. Netflix is only interested in having this movie out on your home screen for like a week or two, and then they're moving on to the next thing. It's just like, they don't let movies breathe.
It's exactly that. It's a movie made for short attention spans. This is not made to have a lasting impact. I think culturally, they just like, we're gonna put out a vampire movie. Jamie Foxx signed on. Start shooting this. The script's not done, sir. It's like, I don't care. Jamie Foxx on board. Start shooting. What do you add?
I gave the movie 3 stars. Okay. It's not far off from 2.5. Like I was honestly kind of like, I think I was a little more positive when I thought about it, but when I look at other movies I gave 3 stars, it's like, this is half the movie of other 3-star films of like other genres and stuff. But yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it for what it is. It's like that, as much as I want to bemoan it, like that Netflix formula works. Like I enjoy watching this stuff because sometimes you just throw on something kind of light, something not serious, and I'm not looking for much more. And I get a couple of interesting elements out of it. That's where I'm at.
Because I was thinking about like, I think the one Netflix movie that stood out as slightly better than the others was The Adam Project, and that one I think I only gave 3 stars to. So this one was less than this one wasn't as good as The Adam Project. So that's kind of my reasoning. It's always tough to compare and contrast.
Oh, it is. It's impossible,
especially on a 5-star scale. I find myself like going over like the same. I find myself giving a bunch of 3 ratings. It's I like this 3 more than that 3, but not enough to give it a 4. Right? So it's like it's all there's some subjectivity in there for sure. Like
yeah. I mean, I was against giving things ratings for a long time until I joined Letterboxd. It's just like, I don't have time to write my thoughts on every single movie, so I'll just throw in the rating there as well, and people can interpret it how they want. I think it's pretty clear if people are listening to this, it's all about the discussion. I mean, there's a number at the end of it, but you sort of get our impressions of it through.
But through the whole movie, as soon as Jamie Foxx had his discussion there with his ex-wife or estranged wife, all I could think of Lisa needs braces. Dental plan.
Yeah,
Lisa
yeah, exactly.
needs braces. Dental plan. The rest of the movie, I had this in the back of my head, so maybe I wasn't paying attention. It was just like,
Around the internet, I mean, we usually talk about the other ratings. Rotten Tomatoes, the critic rating. You have a guess on this?
critic rating. I'm gonna say like 65.
65. It was at 56. Just swap those two numbers around. 56% critic. What do you think the audience rating is on this on Rotten Tomatoes?
Audience rating. I'm gonna say like 70 on that one. I think the audience
73%. Okay. Yeah, pretty accurate. Letterboxed. Usually a little more discerning of an audience, I think.
Oh, Letterboxd. I don't know, like around 3. I'm gonna say you have your finger on the pulse here in this one.
2.8.
2.8. Yeah, so you are.
Yeah. Well,
it's in between our two ratings there. So
it could be 2.75. It could be 2.75 of the rounding up to 2.8. Showing us on the website.
So we're kind of on either side of what the average is. So like I think so. Yeah. I think we're pretty much in we're in the consensus zone, I think.
What do you think this movie cost to make?
$100 billion. No, I don't know. Let's say 120 million.
120. I mean, you're pretty close. It's reported at $100 million.
Okay.
Which, I mean, that's a lot of money on screen there again, but
like I'm assuming,
that's what things cost these days, I guess.
Again, with the different financial model of paying the act, because the residuals is so much different on streaming, I'm assuming the budgets are higher for this kind of movie because the main actors are getting paid more up front as opposed to the back end, which is why it's like we would normally under the standard Hollywood model or standard movie making models, like for $120 million or $100 million, I'd expect to see a lot more on screen in terms of sets, in terms of special effects. But I think it's just a function of the industry where it's like, Jamie Foxx, this is probably not going to come to physical media. It's not going to be on any other streaming service or channels. Like he gets paid once for this movie as opposed to getting residuals throughout the lifespan. So it's like, Jamie Foxx is demanding the full Jamie Foxx fee up front. And Dave Franco's getting paid the day rate. No, I don't know. Dave Franco's probably getting paid some money for this.
Well, I can guarantee you he's getting some money for this.
I mean, I just like
what that is. I don't know.
Dave Franco is necessarily as big a household name as
for sure.
Like
Fox is the big star here. Like I didn't recognize any of the other actors really.
No,
I mean Snoop Dogg. Is coming in here probably. I don't know how he gets involved with some projects, but he shows up and he's Snoop Dogg, right? Yeah,
which I don't mind at all. I'm like, if you just randomly, if Snoop Dogg just showed up in every movie, I'd be perfectly fine with that. I have no problem with that.
What we need to go back to is a little bit of the old studio system from like the 20s and 30s. It's like Snoop Dogg can become a Netflix employee and just show up in all these different movies kind of randomly, right?
Also, I was like, I'm really disappointed that you have Snoop Dogg involved. Like you're not going to go the route. You're not going to get your own custom rap song for the credits. Come on, guys.
That's a really good point. They should have, especially if they're trying to get with a bit of 80s, 90s throwback. Let's get the custom rap song at the end here. What a massive wasted opportunity. 2 stars.
Yeah. Summary, I would say day shift, don't quit your day job.
Well said.